Today's topic is on assignment types and trends. I'm actually not your moderator. I'm supposed to be sitting here. We don't actually have a moderator today. I was told that's not a budgetary decision, but more of an idea that the three of us are going to have an open dialogue, a conversation, a little bit like a fireside chat, hence the nice ambience that goes well with the weather for today. So yes, we're going to try and keep this very interactive in a sense that it's got a little bit of time of Q&A at the end. But if you've got anything while we're talking, that's a good idea, that's a good question, please raise your hand and hopefully we will see you and we can get into that conversation. Quite frankly, as we are asking each other's questions, it's almost easier if you've got questions to throw in, so please keep them coming. It's actually quite encouraged. Before we get started, maybe an intro. Jenny, Remco, would you like to say a few words to say hello?
My name is Remco Rehberg. I'm one of the managing directors of professional organizing in Germany. We are a DSP supporting immigration services, destination services, both inbound, majority of our business is inbound, as well as outbound.
My name is Jenny Elsby. I am a client services manager for the EMEA region for WHR Global, which is a full-service relocation management company. We are US headquartered. We are based out of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. Been around for about 26 years, privately owned. And in 2020, we opened our Basel, Switzerland office to support the EMEA region and our Singapore office to support APAC. And I am now leading up operations in our Basel office. So.
Classic. Yeah, my name is Dima Lorenz. I'm the VP of Client Services for Dwellworks in APAC. Have been in the industry now for close to 18 years, all of that time out in Asia. I had the privilege of spending 10 years in China, then 10 years in Hong Kong, and then for the last 2 years I'm now based out of Australia. I look after our RMC and client relationships across Asia, and generally after commercial opportunities in the Asia region. So yeah, really excited to be here today, and we're going to try and kick off with, Jenny, maybe your first question to us.
Indeed, indeed. So perhaps I am going to start this question to you, Dima. So when it comes to assignment types, what changes have you observed in your market specifically? And would you say are these mainly related to the mobility programs or around the profile of your assignees going into your locations?
Yeah, a little bit of both, actually. I mean, we've had a number of changes, obviously, throughout the COVID period and then there afterwards. A number of these changes are brought along by things that we've seen internationally that I'm sure you will have seen in your markets as well. And then a few things that are more APAC specific that are to do with, quite frankly, with a number of geopolitical changes in the region as well. But on a sort of general trends, certainly across Asia, an uptake on short-term assignments versus the traditional long-term assignment packages. With that also a change in profile of transferees. Obviously, there's always city or country-specific nuances where some countries are not behaving differently. APAC is obviously a very large area. But in general, there seems to have been a trend for less families moving, more individuals moving, more couples moving into the APAC region. And with that, obviously, a change in what kind of services they are receiving. We've seen also a really significant uptake on more of an individual approach to the policies and the programs, a lot more fine-tuning based upon the request of the individual. So less of this sort of cookie-cutter approach, one policy fits all, and more of an adherence. And maybe this is because of international drives in DEI. But it's certainly far more of a personal perspective these days, which is great to see. The other part, or maybe a further extension of that, is that there's more input on self-selection, so that transferees have more of a voice where in the region they would like to be based, whether it's a specific a city within a location, and obviously that goes hand to hand with more transferees being able to work remotely or cross-border remote work. So that's sort of, but I think these are trends that you see internationally as well. maybe more specifically towards APAC, we've seen China not being, quite frankly, as important as it has been in the past. We've seen a big uptake in India. We've also seen far more importance across Southeast Asia, Singapore being a big story in the last year. But yeah, so in summary, more flexibility, less long-term traditional assignment, an uptake in short-term projects, and with all of that, more of a voice to the transferee on exactly where they like to be based.
And Dima, on that, do you think those are going to be long-term trends, or do you think these are sort of short-term initiatives right now?
Obviously, yeah, the crystal ball, but yeah, we reckon at least the medium term.
Okay.
I mean, some of it is a reaction to COVID, that there are some countries where, specifically in Asia, that transferees currently don't want to go to because of what has happened during the COVID period. But at the same time, I think that flexibility will be very hard to roll back up onto. But I think you're seeing similar trends, so in not just in Asia, right? In EMEA.
Correct. I need to start this with a disclaimer that being a Dutch person running a business in Germany, being married to a German person, I tend to have a advanced skill set in saying things that are insultive to Germans. Having said that, I see that with the majority of our clients being German corporates, Germans tend to be a bit traditional or taking our time to assess changes, to have a look at them carefully before implementing. So I think in general, we're still seeing a lot of traditional expat assignments, long-term assignments of senior executives with families, etc. Having said that, I mentioned in our prep that I looked up some figures from one of our key clients that has several hundreds of moves. And what we see there is that in approximately 2016, 75% of their authorizations were assignments, long-term assignments. And in 2022, 75% are local international hires. So either being for a limited period, but definitely a major shift in their approach, in the type of assignments, or the change of the assignment types. We're also seeing a shift where, rather than sending the German specialist or the German executive to the foreign branch, is to get the people that are ultimately going to do the job, sending them over for a short assignment, for a longer training, on the job training, and taking that know-how back. And like you said, shorter, more flexible assignments, and with that, adjustments in the support packages they're receiving. I suppose a big change is where the long-term assignments typically come with ongoing support for international schools, support with renewals. Where it comes to international hires, we typically see support upon landing, immigration support, but then you're kind of on your own, up to the point where also renewal processes for immigration are expected to be handled by the employees on their own. Yeah.
And Jenny, what about you? I mean, in your market, and also maybe even a step further, what sort of do you see as some of the driving forces behind this? I mean, what is bringing these changes along? Is it DEI? Is it COVID? Is it where does this come from?
And I think it's a really interesting question, and obviously there's lots of factors. If I was to talk specifically about what I'm seeing and the work that I'm doing right now, there's been two things. I think I'm seeing a really big push towards DE&I, so the big push on diversity. So we're seeing lots of clients implementing policies to enable that DE&I to take place. So that might be, for example, allowing lower level assignees from, for example, North Africa to move to Europe without having to provide that full spectrum of services. We're also seeing companies reacted, obviously, to the situation in Ukraine this past year. So there's been a real push on, and obviously wanted to move their employees very, very quickly that they hadn't budgeted for or weren't expecting to have to move on. Obviously wanted to be supportive from a humanitarian perspective. So what we'd seen is that companies were really having to react quite agilely. They were having to be agile anyway, to really put forward solutions to enable these basically these employees to move from a very dangerous location to a safe location. So that was something that we as an RMC, together with our partners, were asked to work together to put together suitable solutions to be able to facilitate these processes.
Okay. And Remco, on your side, any?
One of the joys of having mostly direct corporate clients is the ability to directly also speak with the source, so to say. And I really think it depends on who you're talking to. I don't believe our counterparts always have full visibility on the corporate agenda on impacting these changes. So when we ask them what is triggering these shifts, I do have to say that costs. I don't think it's the primary trigger, but it's a very welcome, what's the opposite of collateral damage, but an advantage. And once you make that shift, I think it's also difficult to undo that and to get your budgets back up to a different level once you've proven you're able to do that on a different level. Referring to these reverse relocations where the specialists from the come to Germany rather than the senior people go and manage the foreign branch. Topics, diversity, inclusion, focus on the local talent are topics being brought up that are impacting the change in assignment types. Let me peek at my note. We do hear how sustainability is a topic.
Yeah.
Frankly speaking, when somebody tells me that the policy is changing or assignments are more short-term or things happen more often remotely, I also feel like cost is not a primary trigger, but there's a desire to look for ways to be more sustainable, and then this obviously fits the agenda very well. Realizing it's my time for a question. So if you're looking at the change in assignment types, the both of you, how does this impact you? How do you see it impact the experience for the employee?
So I think there's two facets to this. I think it gives, by being able to offer these slightly more flexible, these slightly more, I say cost effective, not always, but these new programs and these new policy types, I think companies are offering employees an experience that they would not have previously been able to have, by offering somebody to move with perhaps limited benefits to take up a voluntary role in Northern Europe when it's an opportunity that historically they would not have been able to have. So there is a benefit for the employees. However, typically what we are seeing is that as these benefits are reduced, this can create challenges with the services that are provided to employees on the ground. And I'm sure that many of you who are servicing these employees with limited benefits are experiencing this, because what happens, the relocation needs don't change. However, what actually happens is, for example, instead of going with an in-person perhaps support for a DSP service, we're seeing people go to perhaps online support or really just focusing on perhaps the compliance piece. And I know this is something Remco is going to talk about a bit more in the future, but they're focusing on the compliance piece, but they're not actually focusing on the human piece, which I think is really important in this industry. That is one of our biggest values. And so what we do see is that, yes, they're getting the opportunity to move, but they may not necessarily be getting the support that they need. And I feel that that's something that we work very closely with our partners on communicating perhaps where these new policy types are not necessarily fit for purpose for all circumstances. Perfect example, if you're moving to Northern Europe and you're coming from North Africa, you may not be able to use your home bank account, but you probably won't be able to open one in Norway for a very long time. So those kind of things small things when there's no support on the ground from the company to cover those services. We do see small things like that really impacting the assignee experience. So I think it's still very much a work in progress, and I think that's where you and this industry as partners, we need to be consulting and we need to be sharing that information with the client to make sure they make the correct decisions for their employees.
Right. Yeah, and to be honest, it's very much echoing this. We have on the front, this all looks absolutely fantastic to the transferee, right? A lot more flexibility. They get more of a voice in how they would like to relocate, what kind of programs they would like to take up. They're being given increasing the options on lump sum programs, core flex. That all for the transferee, it seems like an empowerment, right? It's like this is something where you have your own voice, you've got your own input in that upcoming relocation. But to exactly what you just said, very often the transferees do not actually know what kind of services are required, where they need to spend their money on, and what are the sort of basic compliant parts that they need to fulfill. And this is where it then folds back up on us as a DSP to continue educate the transferee, give them more information, get them up to speed on what they actually should be selecting, which is yet another additional service scope that is added to us. So we're not just executing on many of the programs, but we're actually advising the transferee on which part of that flexible program they should actually spend their allocation allowance on. But I think the really big dangerous part in that is really the compliance part. I mean, when you give transferees the flexibility to either choose what kind of program, or in addition to choose where they're going to be staying and where they're going to be working from, that they can work increasingly from hubs, in the sense of like a city hub where they then move on short-term projects into various regions. That obviously opens a whole can of worms, particularly on the visa and immigration front. And Remco, you and me, we've been working on a few of these very fun projects over the last few years. And I mean, from particularly your perspective, visa and immigration.
Oh, I did see a question. This lady had a question.
Oh,
Did I see
yes.
a question? Sorry.
Thank you. No, it's exactly what we're hoping for. Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. So do you think with that change of the flexibility of the assignee choosing their packets, us as an industry, we might shift the way we cater for the end user, the consumer? Because we speak lots about B2B, but I can see there's emerging a B2C conversation, and this B2B migrating to the B2C, how we can cater better for the individual that come to our services and ensure they are within compliance, because I know even for the domain of the company, they are actually corporate, how we as a company, we are reading these and getting ourselves ready to shift our policies to cater better for the end user.
That's an excellent question. I mean, no, really good. I mean, to be honest, I think within this industry, all of us have more than one client, right? We have essentially 3 clients. We have the corporate, we have the RMC, and we have got the end consumer. And it's sometimes very difficult to know who you're actually catering for. I mean, the one that pays you, or the one that actually is experiencing that particular service. And yes, from my opinion, I think there is with that inflexibility more of a shift towards listening to the transferee and trying to even more to make their relocation a success. But again, there is these other stakeholders involved that need to have a say at the table as well. And obviously just making sure that the transferee is happy is not going to be sufficient. But I don't know if you're seeing this differently.
I think that we all have, I think there's a lot to be said for we talked about engagement. It's not engagement, it's partnering. I think there's a lot to be said about partnering. I think we as an industry need to be listening both up and down. And I think that our role, certainly, I think of me as an RMC, I need to be listening to partners on the ground, DSP partners, our assignees, and also very much be engaging with the client, because I think it has to be an open dialogue to make sure that we're all servicing everybody's needs, shall we say, in my humble opinion. Remco?
Yeah, I agree. I think we're addressing a bit of this in a later question, where the keyword is dialogue.
Yeah.
And one thing we're trying to do is empowering our team members, and I think this is a valuable asset to have when your staff members are also able to ask what's the question behind the question, rather than it just ends with an answer to the question where we answered the question perfectly, but we really understand why this question is being asked, or why this change is being proposed.
Thank you. But coming back on the visa and immigration front, it's there in particular. I know that this is fun when you've got transferees sort of choosing their own locations.
Yeah, so talking about the impact of assignment changes on visa and immigration. Again, let me throw in like a German cliche. We're used to having quite a significant number of clients that carefully plan their assignments. So up to the point, we still are seeing clients that announce assignments starting in a year and a half from today, and then are asking for, is there an update 1 week later, which is lovely. However, the shift to more short-term, more flexible approach includes also the lead time to make that decision and to get the go-ahead for an assignment, for a short-term assignment, is becoming shorter and shorter, and very often not allowing enough lead time anymore to complete an immigration process. It seems employees are willing to go on a short-term assignment, to decide for a short-term assignment on a very, I'm happy with leaving in 6 weeks from now. To give you mentioned it earlier, we have worked together on a great projects from Europe to China. And there you see that although the Chinese have a very lean-ish immigration process, a requirement is when it's someone leaving from Germany is a legalized non-criminal record, for which the current timeline is about 10 weeks. And then there you go. Yesterday in the bar, another topic I wanted to address on impact on visa and immigrations. Yesterday in the bar, I came up with a term. I call it in compliance unawareness. I think
Trademarked.
Yeah. Me and my wife Sophie Rehberg, we have very different agendas when we go to bars. We divide and conquer. I'm sitting in a corner coming up with phrases. Anyway, so I think most of you will recognize that companies still have compliance when it comes to visa and immigration as of crucial importance. We're seeing the same in the assignment type changes, not affecting their willingness to authorize professionals to support with visa and immigration. It's key.
Correct.
When I mention in compliance unawareness, what I am seeing is, one example is one of our key clients considers every assignment shorter than 6 months a business trip. Mm-hmm. And very often, it took a while to get to sit at a table with the right persons to address that for many destinations, it's not the length of an assignment that determines whether the rest of the world or the authorities would also consider it a business trip. And then it's always the joyful moment when you ask them, what will this person be doing exactly? And then, typically in one sentence, this ain't a business trip. Yeah. So the business pushing for people to come as soon as possible, a business visa, a business trip, very often being the right solution to solve that issue, but leading to incompliant situations. And I think what's not helping is the fact that authorities very often have this particular group is not considered a priority when it comes to checking if somebody might be doing other things, with certain countries definitely being an exception, but a lot of countries will not ask a lot of questions when you arrive as a business traveler, even if it's for like a 6-month period, which in my book is a pretty long trip to have meetings.
And if I may add, we talk about immigration here, and I did just want to touch on this because I was in the posted worker session the other day. Don't profess to be a posted worker expert at all, but I did think this is also very relevant as well, even within Europe for this for populations traveling and working within Europe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think partially there's a blind spot there as well. Yeah. Some people don't even include that in the scope of immigration. It's more related to social security, and before you know it, it's not a topic on the agenda. Exciting, Germany not being one of them, but I looked up earlier this week that apparently there's 51 countries as of 2023 that now have adopted the nomad visa or a similar solution that allows remote work, and that goes beyond just being able to obtain a visa without local employment contract, payroll, without doing a job in the destination, but often goes even beyond with tax benefits, and this is an exciting change. We'll hear more of.
Remco will be sharing the list later on, so you can all choose your next.
I memorized them in the bar yesterday.
So, gentlemen, a question from me for you two. perhaps I will start with you, Dima. So aside from the assignee experience, have your companies, obviously in the realm of being DSPs, have you had to adapt internally to these changes in the assignment types? And if so, can you tell me a little bit how you've done that?
Yeah, so we had some significant changes, particularly for us in Asia, because as I said, I think the changes and the difference in assignment types is more prevalent in some markets over others. And sort of very specific example was in China, where actually the shift in assignment type has left Dazhu decision to reduce that service and exit particular on destination services, but double down on corporate housing. And what we realized over the last few years during COVID, but then also coming out of COVID, was that we had seen a very noticeable change in and decrease in revenue on a per file basis. So we were still actually staying relatively stable and level on volumes within a certain range, but then the actual revenue on a per file basis reduced very noticeably. And that was also in combination with less opportunity on generating add-on revenues, for example, through real estate transactions, which in the China market is something very prevalent. And you take the volume, so essentially the work or the files managed by your assignee managers remain stable, but then the revenue drops. At the same time, the need for compliance, the need for security, data security, overall operational costs continue to increase. And again, in particular markets, that cost can be more significant than in others because it may be harder to operate a business in certain geographical areas. And there you have it. Suddenly you have a business line that has become unprofitable due to changes in assignment types. And that's obviously, quite frankly, it's a scary situation. I mean, on our side, we're lucky that we're doing both destination services and corporate housing, and within that particular market, we were able to shift a lot more focus onto corporate housing, onto short-term accommodation and temporary assignments. So that's been a little bit of a silver lining on this. But it's obviously for other markets certainly also a consideration to bear in mind. If it's with changes in assignment type, it can become very hard in operating at the margins that we all need. And I mean, none of us are in it entirely for just the fun of it. I mean, at the end of the day, we all need to be able to have enough revenue that comes in through the door. Yeah. Question is with that, what is the solution out of it? Many are pointing towards technology and seeing if you can make processes more efficient, which certainly to an extent is true. But then the other part, this comes back to our original discussion around more dialogue between RMCs, DSPs, and then further down to the corporate level, where I think it's very important for our end users, well, not the consumer, but the end client, the corporates, to be aware of some of these difficulties that the changes in assignment types are bringing along. And that's I think, something where not necessarily is done enough in order to advance that conversation.
Thank you.
I can relate or I can agree with everything you just mentioned. So let me try and add another angle. I promise it's going to be my third and final remark. Cliche about Germans, but we like to be able to plan our work. Of course, you can't be in this industry when you're not. I learned the word is agile. When you're not agile. And I think we're all used to work in a world where we need to adapt constantly to many variables that are in motion to be able to flourish your business, to exist in this industry. Having said that, specifically for the changing assignment types, I can see how, from a cultural perspective, it requires a lot of flexibility, a lot of mental flexibility. So if I would look at the team, we have a team of 35 full-time in the office in Frankfurt, and if I look at the team, the traditional German thing would be is you can very quickly provide clarity in your answers. An answer can be yes or no, and with the need for more flexibility, also in the content of the support you're providing, there's a whole world in between yes and no. And it's a journey where you move away from, no, that's not included or that's not possible. So I think what's key there, I want to say again, I checked in the bar that we have 14 different nationalities in our team now, which I think on this group of 35 is pretty considerable, and speaking a multiple of that different languages fluently. And I think this helps to have dialogues, relevant dialogues with your clients, also with your corporate mandates, with the RMCs, to kind of learn, okay, how can I have a meaningful impact on the changes we're seeing.
Okay. It's really interesting. I mean, because we talked sort of about the factors. We talked about what impact that has on the assignee. We talked about what impact it has on the DSPs in the industry. What about the RMC side? I mean, are you seeing? And sorry, you're representing the entire RMC world now. But are you seeing from your side already? Are you seeing RMCs already including more on these flexible approaches, on these changes in assignment types within either the RFP process or within the conversation with the corporates?
I think already we're seeing in the RFP process, certainly we already have clients who already include these sort of sub-policies and the need to be flexible within their programs, and that there's definitely, I would say, a request for more information and understanding of what we as a company and what our partners can also potentially support with. So I think that's definitely in place. I think the other thing that we, as an RMC, what we are doing to make sure that we can support our clients, I think it's really important to state here that, and I think we've all stated it, we are all in this as partners, right? You know, an RMC, we're just one layer up the ladder, essentially, from DSPs or other partners on the ground. We all have the same challenges when it comes to pricing or it comes to other issues. We all need to remain profitable as well. So I think what we are seeing is that we're having to engage in those partnerships, and we and I talk about WHR as a company, we always believe it's a partnership. We need to be speaking to you. We need to be talking to our partners. We need to be understanding what's happening on the ground. We need to be working with you as well as working with our clients, because it's only as a team approach that we can perhaps develop ideas, develop solutions to be able to service the needs of our clients. And I think it really is, if I must emphasize, a collaborative approach, and whether the results are in investing in new technology, and I know this, I don't want to lead into this question, but I know it's coming. Maybe it's technology, maybe it's, I don't know. I'm happy to hear. I'm sure there's a wealth of knowledge within this room. I'm happy to hear suggestions of what you, as a population, think we could do. But I really would have to stress that it's collaboration. It's listening to all parties and making sure that we are discussing and coming up with those solutions together, because you're all SMEs.
And for you, Remco, I mean, are you?
Yeah.
You mentioned what I want to stop at. You mentioned RFP. So if I look at requests for proposals and how they are impacted, I have the feeling I'm seeing two different opposite directions. That we've had a fair share of RFPs that very specifically asked for this destination. These are the services you need to price or confirm you're able to provide. And I have the feeling I'm seeing more often RFPs that say, can you do this country? Mm-hmm. And basically everything potentially needed without really specifying what that then might be. And on the other hand, the page becoming very, very long in all the items like short-term, long-term business trips, showing that how companies are embracing this flexibility in the types of assignments, in the types of support they're offering, and then trying to get a price tag on all of them. So definitely. Also, what I found very interesting is, I think it's first one was maximum 6 months ago, where I saw that. And I've now only seen it twice, RFPs where it's included to be able to provide support or advice on the ability to work remotely, to have workations. So I think that also is a reflection of this flexibility and how clients are looking to to get professional advice and get also a price tag on those services.
So that's already coming up. That's already
Yeah.
appearing. In, okay,
Yeah.
very cool. Okay.
I'm having the feeling you're both looking at me again. I'm having this massive screen in front of me with a clock. I know we have lunch officially starting in 3 minutes.
Ah, okay.
So would the best suggestion be to see if there's any further
Yes,
questions at this point from the audience?
Daniel,
Daniel.
you promised us you would be nice.
Hi, so I'm with Alter Global. It's more of a maybe observation and something we've done on our side of business as an RMC. We did a map out maybe 19, 20 locations across EMEA and identify kind of critical, not even milestones in a relocation, but also in terms of showstoppers, compliance related or tax related, right? So many times clients come to us and obviously the offering is shrinking. And I think, Dima, you made a point, communication back to the client and highlighting that, because this gets forgotten in a mix. People forget about it completely. And essentially what we do is we rely on our partners to feed that information to us and just confirm, is there still compliance risk in the process? Is the assignee creating a tax liability, for the company, potentially overstaying, in the market, right? So having really the pulse check on the market and being able to actually come and reinforcing information periodically, right. Because there's client changes as well, in the global mobility team. So one person who knew and leaves takes the information with him or her away, and all of a sudden there's a massive gap. So there's an education that we need to do, not just once a year or whenever a person changes, but frequently pushing information back to the client.
Great.
And I'm sure probably majority of the DSPs either hear or know where those compliance risks are. You mentioned relying on the employees to renew their visa. That's a red flag to me. That should be flagged to RMC for the discussion, things like that, right? So anyway, I think a good way to start is to look at the top markets, the busiest markets where the most exposure is, have some sort of a documentation, and as a DSPs, bring it up in the conversations with the RMCs and really keep it on the agenda until the question is answered and the exposure is identified.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for
That wasn't really the question.
No,
was
no.
it?
No,
Just the
it's
comment.
Great
good.
episode.
That's
Very
good.
good.
Thanks.
And you guys are the SMEs as well. That's the thing. You're on the ground. You're seeing things. Feed it back.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh.
Here I am.
Hi.
Hi, Stefano Pacifico from ECA, Italy. I wonder if you ever noticed some discussion on return on investment, because I've been listening these trends for many years, the localization, short-term assignment. It's not really new in my experience. Remote work probably is newer because there is a lot of discussion on this, and when COVID came up, we were afraid about losing the job because there was no more international assignment, but we are still now, so we'll be working. But return on investment is something that we should think about, because international assignments are costly, are expensive, so which is the benefit? Have you ever checked the benefit, this discussion on this?
Do you mean specifically the return of investment for the DSPs or for the company? Right. Yeah, on our side as as a DSP, we have not done those studies, but I know that those studies have been done on the corporate level.
Yeah.
So that there's corporations out there that have looked into that very, very carefully to determine, okay, a traditional assignment is that amount of costs versus a more flexible approach, and what is the return on that?
And you see the different types. For example, if I was going to, we see with some of our clients that we have obviously the long-term, we have developmental assignments we see quite a lot these days, where they're going out for training, whereas they'll have slightly limited benefits comparative to the full long-term assignment package. And I do think that companies, in fact, I know they are, having been in-house historically, they are looking at that. Obviously they are making strategic decisions based on their employees, but I don't think it's really something that in my experience as an RMC, and I think as a DSP, I'll let Remco advise, we haven't specifically done those studies at our level.
No, same.
Yeah.
So just going back to the assignment types, it's just a curiosity. Has the conversation with your corporate and clients started on the nomad digital? Is this conversation coming down already to the RMCs? How it's cascading to the DSPs, immigration services? How is the topic at the moment in the market? Just looking at Asia, Europe, because I know that's a big thing in Latin America at the moment about the nomad digital. I don't know because of the destinations, but just wanted to see if it's different in regions or by industry.
I have to be honest and say within my spectrum right now, it's not actually a conversation that we're having with clients. I think it's a very important topic, and I think it's something that we need to be aware of, and I think that us, with our access to SMEs, do need to be having those conversations with clients. I think we have access to a wealth of knowledge when it comes to compliance, when it comes to best practices, and I think it's something that even if we're not yet having those conversations, we should be prepared to in future.
And just to add on it, I think within Europe it may potentially be a little bit easier because obviously as a European passport holder there is slightly more flexibility on this. Not necessarily on a tax perspective, but in terms of it's easier for an individual to move. With an APAC, it does be a little bit more complex. We have seen requests from companies asking us for advice, so that has come through. But very often we actually hear more of stories of individuals who have taken their own decisions to, quite frankly, relocate to Bali and work from there, or relocate to Phuket. And so there is definitely a segment of the global workforce that has taken that decision, but very often those decisions are then made by themselves, by the individuals who are saying, I'm living in Phuket and I'm going to work from there, which you can understand to some degree because it will be probably less, but the corporate may not be that interested in picking up the bill to relocate somebody to a sort of different surrounding like that.
Yeah, I'm seeing the same thing, that I have the feeling that companies are willing to facilitate, but not necessarily leave the ownership of such, and also the bill with the employee looking to do that.
If you want to go, but yeah.
Yeah, and you questioned like whether it's perhaps industry related, geographics. I think both come in play. If I look at a number of our clients are large pharmaceutical companies that are already for such a long time, finding their talent on a global level, and are so accustomed to, having completely mixed teams, mixed cultures, mixed backgrounds, so they have an easier time, also working remotely. And where I see that more traditional companies seem to feel like the physical presence is very important. There needs to be a clear structure and hierarchy. I guess it's the German talking again, but yeah.
That's number 4.
Yeah, I know, but yeah.
We've got a sign here saying lunch is served, but any other questions, anything else? Well, with that, thank you very, very much for your time. And
thank you.
Absolute pleasure.